The year was 1884, and the wind on the Kansas plains was the kind that carried more than just dust, it carried memory. The kind of memory that lived in scarred wood and lonesome porches, in letters sent and never returned, in silences that stretched longer than the sky. Her name was Naomi Bell, a black woman born into a world that never quite made room for her voice. But she had learned to carry grace like armor, quietly, firmly. At 29, Naomi answered a mail-order ad. She had nothing left to lose but the weight of being overlooked. Christian woman of character sought, willing to live humbly, race unimportant, heart required. That last part. Heart required, it made her dare. So she packed her Sunday dress, the ivory comb her mother left behind, and the last photograph of her baby brother lost to fever the spring before. She took the evening train west. Her hands trembled with hope she didn't know she was still allowed to feel. But when she stepped off at Rock Falls Station, a man stood waiting, pale-skinned, red-faced, and looked her up and down like someone checking a shipment. Then he muttered to the station master, "She's colored." Didn't say that in the letters. And walked away, just like that. No name, no apology, no kindness. Naomi stood there as the train hissed behind her. People passed. Some stared. Most didn't bother to look at all. She was just another story they'd seen too many times to care. But what Naomi didn't know, what the man who rejected her never would, was that someone did see her. Across the platform, a man leaned against a wagon wheel, his hat low over steel blue eyes. His boots were scuffed, his coat worn at the edges. But his gaze didn't flinch. He didn't say a word that day, but his heart spoke the moment hers broke. He'd seen enough of the world to know a strong thing when it refused to shatter. And for the first time in years, so had Naomi, though she didn't yet know what to call it. Have you ever been told without words that you weren't welcome just for being who you are? This story isn't about pity. It's about a woman who stayed kind in a world that wasn't, and the man who saw in her not what she lacked, but what made her rare. Stay with us, because what happens next isn't loud, but it's exactly what the heart's been waiting for. Harvest Creek didn't take kindly to newcomers, especially ones they didn't understand. Cora James knew this. She'd felt it in the long silences at the inn, in the way hands paused when she walked into the dry goods store, in how the preacher shook hers without ever really looking in her eyes. She stayed quiet, didn't stir trouble, paid for her meals with the coin she had left, and offered to sweep floors in exchange for warm bread. No one offered her a room. No one asked why she came. But then 3 days later, Mason Thorne returned. He came with his wagon again, this time slower, and nodded at her where she sat shelling peas by the side porch. He didn't ask questions, just tipped his hat and said, "You cook, I do," she replied without looking up. "Good. I need a hand." Housekeeper quit. Long winter, too quiet. Cora squinted into the sunlight. "You know who I am, I remember you," he said, "and I don't ask a second time." She stood slowly. "I don't do charity, and I don't do pity," Mason replied. "Fair trade, warm meals, and steady work for a roof, and respect. Respect." It was a word tossed around loosely by men who meant something else, but Mason said it like it cost him something. Cora nodded once. "I'll come." The ride to Thorne Ranch was long enough for silence, but not long enough for stories. Mason didn't press. She didn't offer. And yet something in the space between them felt level. His house sat at the crest of a low hill overlooking wheat fields that moved like water in the wind. It was clean but not polished, lived in, worn in the honest way like a pair of boots too good to throw out. He showed her the kitchen, the pantry, a small spare room in the back with a narrow bed and a Bible on the nightstand. "No locks," he said. "No curfews. Just coffee at 6. She nodded. "I'll earn my keep." "I reckon you already have," Mason said. "Just by staying upright." That night, Cora cooked stew from root vegetables and smoked ham. Mason ate silently, offering only a quiet thank you as he pushed his plate forward for seconds. The sun dipped low, casting gold across the kitchen table. Mason leaned back in his chair, studying her with a gaze that didn't demand. "I thought you'd left," he said simply. "I almost did." "What changed your mind?" Cora looked down at her hands, strong, capable, steady. "Someone looked at me without flinching." He nodded. That shouldn't be rare. No, she agreed. But it is. They didn't speak much after that. But when Cora washed the dishes and Mason refilled the stove with wood, the quiet between them no longer felt like avoidance. It felt like something taking root. Maybe not yet love, but respect. The rare kind. The kind built from noticing what others walk past. What happens when two people, each weathered by silence, finally find a space where neither has to shrink? Could respect, that quiet cousin of love, be the very thing that starts it all? Thorn Ranch woke before the sun. Cora James was used to early rising from her years as a hired cook for a wealthy Atlanta family people who never used her name, just gal or you. But here things were different. No one gave her orders. No one looked at her. No one touched. Mason Thorne kept his distance in a strange way. Not coldly, but clearly. He left her alone in the kitchen, leaving only the occasional handwritten note. Don't forget to feed the horses apples this afternoon, or eggs in the basket. Don't let the weasels get to them. The notes were gentler than any flirtation she'd ever received. Cora began to smile softly whenever she saw his notes. But it also scared her. Late one afternoon, after a sudden downpour, she stepped out onto the back porch. Mason was sitting, an old book in his hand, his muddy boots beside him. He invited her to sit with a nod. They sat there listening to the rain pounding on the tin roof. No talking, no need. Then suddenly he asked, his voice low and even. That guy, the guy who wrote the letter and left you at the station, did he have a name? Cora clenched her hands. Yes, but I don't have it anymore. I burned it. I should have said something, Mason said. But I thought, maybe you wouldn't want someone like me involved. Why, she asked softly. He looked out at the rain. Because I used to be the one who turned a blind eye. Rich quiet kept out of trouble. And now, I see more clearly now, and I regret not speaking up sooner. Cora was silent. But inside, all the memories of rejection, of hurt, of men who saw her as a commodity rose up. She wanted to believe Mason. But she knew respect today does not guarantee protection tomorrow. 3 days later, a woman came to the farm. Lady Alden, the wife of the local banker. Blonde hair, pink dress, voice as soft as metallic rain. Mr. Thorne, she said, I hear you. Employ a stranger, a colored woman living with you. Mason only nodded. Her name is Cora, and she works here. Her eyes were cold. You know how such things can get people talking? I know, Mason said, but I don't follow other people's tongues. Cora stood a few feet away, her hands clasped together, not intervening. But when Mrs. Alden's eyes fell on her, she heard the unspoken words, you don't belong here. That evening, Mason handed her a cup of tea. They stood by the window. What if people start turning their backs on you, she asked softly. He shrugged. If they turn their backs because I respect someone, then they're not worth keeping. Cora pursed her lips. Then she said for the first time in days, I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. Mason looked at her. Cora, you're not trouble. You're the right thing. And for a moment, she felt like she could believe it. What happens when the walls we've built to protect ourselves begin to tremble under the weight of someone else's quiet care? Could Cora learn to trust a man's respect, not because he says it, but because he lives it? What have you felt so far walking alongside Cora's journey? Was it quiet anger when she was rejected without a word, just for the skin she wore? Was it a flicker of hope when a man didn't turn away, but stayed present in silence? Or maybe it was fear, that the warmth she's finding at Thorn Ranch could vanish as quickly as it came. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't surviving the rejection. It's daring to believe that maybe you've finally found somewhere to rest. But can Cora truly open her heart when the past keeps knocking on her door? In the next part, someone from long ago will return, not to offer apology, but to stir the wounds she thought had healed. Will she stand firm or slip back into silence? The wind had shifted. Cora could feel it before she saw the letter tucked beneath the salt tin on the kitchen table, its paper soft at the corners, like it had been read more than once before finding its way here. From Georgia, Silas said, gently, nodding toward the envelope. Came with the mail rider. Figured it might matter. Cora's hands paused over the dish basin. The water had long gone cold, but her heart beat warm and loud in her chest. She dried her hands slowly, sat down, opened it. There was no greeting, just 5 sentences scrawled in a familiar hand. They say you've taken up with a white man. Don't forget where you come from. Don't bring shame on your mama's grave. We're still your family. Come home while you still can. No signature, but she didn't need one. Her cousin Jeremiah had always been good at speaking, like he owned your choices. Cora folded the letter, tucked it into her apron, and for the rest of the day she said nothing. Not when Silas brought in a fresh load of hay, not when he mended the cracked window in her room, not even when he knocked once that evening and asked softly, "Everything all right?" She only nodded, too tired to lie, too scared to speak. That night she stood on the back porch long after the lanterns were out. The stars blinked overhead, silent as ever. The night smelled of pine smoke and late apples, but her chest felt tight, like the sky had closed in around her. She didn't hear Silas approach, just felt him close but not crowding. "I'm not going to ask what was in the letter," he said after a long pause, "but I know the weight of words that think they own you." Cora looked down. "You ever get tired of fighting people who think they know better than you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Only every day." Silence again. Then she said it, the words she'd buried under manners and quiet. "I loved someone once, back in Georgia, thought he'd marry me. He told me I was lucky he looked past my skin." Her voice cracked. "But he didn't look past it. He looked right through me." Silas didn't flinch, didn't say sorry, just waited. Cora continued. "When the town found out, he let them say I seduced him. My uncle sent me to a boarding house for wayward girls. Called it a favor." Now she looked up. "You still want me here?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal tin. "I carry this," he said, handing it to her. "It belonged to my wife. She used to keep sugar cubes in it for the horses. Still smells like them somehow." Cora opened the lid. The sweetness hit her gently, faint, familiar. "I carry it," Silas said, "not because I can't move on, but because some things shape you. Doesn't mean they define you. Then softer you being here doesn't undo what you've lived. It honors it." She closed the tin, met his eyes. "Then I'll stay," she whispered. "For now." That night Cora sat on her bed, letter folded in her lap. She didn't burn it. She didn't write back either. Some words don't deserve answers, but she opened her mother's Bible, slipped the letter between the pages, and whispered, "I'm still your daughter, just not the one they thought I had to be." What happens when the past tries to claim you again, just when you've started to find peace? Will Cora retreat into silence, or find the courage to stand her ground? Because sometimes the hardest voice to ignore is the one that sounds like home. Spring came slowly to Stillwater Ridge, but when it arrived, it did so in earnest. Wildflowers spilled over the edge of the meadow like spilled ink. Lambs bleated from the neighboring pasture, and in the heart of the Cole homestead, something new was blooming that had nothing to do with the weather. It was Cora. She had begun to hum again while she worked low, quiet melodies that seemed to rise from her bones rather than her throat. The garden she tended behind the barn had started to stretch tall. The hens followed her like loyal children. And Silas had learned to drink his morning coffee slower, just to listen to the way she greeted the day. But not everyone was singing her praises. Word had traveled fast, too fast. It started with stares at the mercantile. Then the mailman forgot her deliveries one too many times. Then came the notes, crumpled pages left under the porch railings, scrawled with words like "trespasser temptress" and worse. Silas burned the first two without comment. By the third, Cora asked him to stop. "Don't hide it from me," she said. "I've lived in shadows enough. I'd rather face it." He looked at her for a long moment, then handed her the paper. She read it, folded it once. Then with hands steady as sun-baked stone, she threw it into the fire. "I will not disappear," she said. The final blow came not from a stranger, but from someone Cora had once called friend, Delilah Hartwell. She had been the only other black woman Cora knew in these parts, a widow who cleaned houses and kept mostly to herself. They'd shared stories once, laughed over chipped teacups. But now Delilah stood at the church picnic, arms crossed, voice cold. "You think a man like him will marry you out loud?" Cora blinked. "I never said, you don't have to. It's written all over you. The soft smiles, the way you look at him like he's a hymn." "I respect him," Cora replied gently. "And he respects me." Delilah's laugh was bitter. Respect won't shield you. One bad harvest, and they'll say you cursed the land. One sickness, and they'll say you brought it. Then let them, Cora said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble, but it carried. Because I'd rather be seen in truth than hidden in fear. Delilah stepped back stunned, and Cora turned, dress whipping in the wind like a flag no longer lowered. That night, Cora didn't cry. She didn't retreat. Instead, she walked to Silas's workshop where he sat carving a new post for the front gate. Build me a sign, she said. He looked up. A sign, she nodded, with my name. Cora Fields, garden steward, keeper of bees. Hang it right by the porch, Silas smiled. Slow, proud. Is that what you want to be known as? He asked. No, she said. That's who I already am. What does it take to claim your space in a world that would rather you shrink? And when someone finally stops apologizing for existing, will love find the courage to rise beside them? In the next part, Silas will make a choice, and Cora will discover just how deeply her roots have grown. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon, hand-delivered, cream-colored with gold embossing. You are cordially invited to the annual Founders Day banquet at Stillwater Ridge Town Hall. Cora's name was listed beneath Silas's in careful script, as if someone had paused, considered whether it was proper, and decided to include her anyway. Silas read it once, then looked up. We don't have to go. Cora's voice was quiet but sure. We do. The hall was polished to a shine, mahogany chairs lined in rows, silver candlesticks flickering across long tables. Ladies wore gowns stitched in soft pastels, and gentlemen gathered near the punch bowl, speaking in low tones about cattle markets and sons. When Silas and Cora walked in the room, hushed, not all at once, but enough to feel it in the gut. Cora's dress was plain but pressed. Her hair was wrapped in indigo cloth, adorned with a small brass pin shaped like a sparrow. Silas wore his best suit, still dusted with the scent of cedar and earth. He offered her his arm. She took it. They stepped forward together. At the head table sat Mayor Harlan Mott, white-starched, red-faced, with a gaze like cold steel. Silas approached him with the calm of a man who had nothing left to prove. Evening, Harlan. The mayor's eyes flicked to Cora, then back. Didn't realize you were bringing company. I didn't bring company, Silas said evenly. I brought my partner. Cora met his stare. There was no apology in her, no shame, just dignity stitched into every breath she drew. Well, Harlan said, the pause longer than necessary. The seats are arranged. Perhaps she could find a place with the staff. Before Silas could speak, Cora stepped forward. I'll stand, thank you, she said. History hasn't been kind to women like me, sitting at fancy tables. But I came here to stand anyway. Not for you, for every girl who thought her name didn't belong on the invitation. The silence crackled. Then someone clapped, slow, deliberate. Mrs. Anne Bradbury. Widow, matriarch. Known for her garden and her unwillingness to suffer fools. She stood. If Miss Fields stands, I'll stand with her. Another voice rose. Then another. By the time Silas pulled out a chair for Cora, half the room was on its feet. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for change to take root. Later that night, back on the porch, Cora sat beside Silas beneath the stars. Why didn't you stop me, she asked. Silas took her hand. Because I've seen what happens when a woman like you stops herself, and I didn't ever want to be the reason you did. They sat in silence, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed, like something waiting to be born. What happens when a woman once cast aside dares to take her place, not as an ornament, but as a voice? In the next part, the question will no longer be, is she worthy of love? It will be, is he brave enough to ask for it out loud? Spring came early to Stillwater Ridge that year. The apple blossoms bloomed faster than expected. The soil turned sweet. The air smelled of rain and mending. Folks said it was the kind of spring that meant good things were coming. At the Ridgeview farm, things had already begun to change. It wasn't loud. There were no parades, no headlines. Just small signs, Cora's name carved above the pantry door next to Silas's. A letter from Miss Lillian in Georgia saying, "You gave us courage to ask for more." And a tin of peach preserves from Mrs. Bradbury with a note for your next supper together. I hope it's forever. That morning, Cora stood barefoot in the garden sleeves, rolled her hands deep in the dirt. She was planting marigolds along the fence, bright, stubborn things that grew no matter what, just like her. Behind her, Silas stepped out with a bundle wrapped in cloth. Got something, he said. She turned, brushing dirt from her brow. What is it? He unwrapped it slowly. A gold band. Simple. Worn smooth at the edges. It was my mother's, he said softly. She wore it through blizzards and births. Through years when the land gave nothing but dust. I never thought I'd pass it on. Until I met you. Cora didn't cry. She reached for the ring and held it like something sacred. I don't need it to know I'm yours, she whispered. But I'd still like to ask, he said. Will you stay not just on this farm, in this life with me? She nodded once, then again, slow, sure, steady. Yes, for all the quiet mornings. For every spring we didn't think we'd live to see. He slipped the ring on her finger. The wind moved soft across the field. No one clapped. No music played. But everything inside them sang. That night they sat on the porch, sipping tea, watching the moon climb high. Cora leaned against Silas and he rested his hand over hers where the gold ring now lived. You ever think about the man who turned you away? He asked gently. She smiled just a little. Not anymore. He nodded. Because if he hadn't, she said, I wouldn't have found you. They didn't need vows to know they belonged. Just the stillness between them. The comfort of being fully seen without needing to be less. And in that quiet on a porch built by weathered hands and stubborn hope, two people stayed. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real, and sometimes real is enough to last a lifetime. Out on the edge of the world where the sky meets the soil with no need for permission, Naomi Bell didn't find a rescue. She found something gentler. She found belonging. Not because she was perfect, not because someone finally picked her, but because one man, quiet, widowed and healing himself, looked at her and saw not weight, not color, not too much, but a woman brave enough to still believe in kindness. Together they built a life not loud but honest, with small dinners and warm porches, with trust earned in silence and love sown into the folds of daily bread. Maybe that's the lesson we take with us, that sometimes what the world calls flaws are really just stories waiting for someone patient enough to listen. If this story touched a quiet place in your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever known someone who had to fight just to feel seen? Would you like to hear what happens next on their little farm at the edge of the prairie? Leave us a comment. Share this video with someone who still believes in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to None, Wild West Saga for more stories of quiet courage, honest love, and women who refuse to disappear. Because out here, being too much might be just what makes you enough.